Kurt Zouma, and the animal abuse scandal. In 2022, West Ham United was enjoying one of their most successful campaigns in recent memory, challenging for a top 4 Premier League finish and making a deep run in the Europa League. Kurt Zouma had been signed as the defensive anchor to solidify this ambition, a significant investment expected to lead by example. However, the club's positive momentum was derailed not by a defeat on the pitch, but by a disturbing video uploaded to social media that appalled the global public. The controversy ignited when footage surfaced of Zouma physically abusing his pet Bengal cat. The video captured the French international drop-kicking the animal across his kitchen floor, slapping it and throwing shoes at it, all while laughter echoed in the background. The evidence was irrefutable. The video itself provided immediate, undeniable proof of cruelty that went instantly viral. The public backlash was ferocious, leading major sponsors, including Adidas, to sever ties with the player immediately. The consequences were swift, encompassing both legal and financial repercussions. The RSPCA intervened to seize Zouma's 2 cats for their safety, and a court subsequently sentenced him to 180 hours of community service, along with a 5-year ban on keeping cats. West Ham levied the maximum permissible fine of 2 weeks' wages, approximately £250,000. Although Zouma continued to feature in the starting 11, his reputation was irreparably damaged, turning him into a pariah, subjected to relentless ridicule and chants from opposition supporters across the country. The fugitive winger. Quincy Promes was once a dynamic force for the Dutch national team, a star who had shone for European giants like Ajax and Sevilla. Yet by 2024, he was competing in the Russian Premier League for Spartak Moscow, living in effective exile. While he continued to find the net in Russia, authorities back in the Netherlands were exposing a clandestine double life that tethered the football star to high-level organised crime. The accusations were staggering. Promes was identified as a key financier in a plot to smuggle over 1,360 kilograms of cocaine through the port of Antwerp. The prosecution's case rested on intercepted communications from Sky ECC, an encrypted messaging service favoured by criminal networks. These decrypted messages revealed Promes operating under the alias Phantasma, actively coordinating the shipment and discussing substantial profits with a clarity that dismantled any defence of ignorance. The evidence portrayed him not as a naive victim, but as a calculated, significant shareholder in the international drug trade. The Amsterdam District Court delivered a severe verdict, a 6-year prison sentence for drug trafficking. However, because Promes remained in Russia, a nation without an extradition treaty with the Netherlands, he became an international fugitive, shielded by geopolitical tensions. The case stands as the irreversible dismantling of a once promising career. Promes effectively became a prisoner of his own circumstances, unable to travel freely without risking immediate arrest, his name forever bound to narcotics rather than football. And Sven-Göran Eriksson. In 2004, the English Football Association presided over a golden generation of talent, burdened with the expectation that icons like David Beckham and Michael Owen would finally deliver international success. However, the organisation's integrity collapsed not on the pitch, but in the boardroom, triggering one of the most humiliating administrative episodes in British football history. The crisis stemmed from a complex web of relationships involving the highest tiers of leadership. It was revealed that both England manager Sven-Göran Eriksson and FA chief executive Mark Palios had engaged in affairs with the same FA secretary, Faria Alam. What transformed this from mere gossip into a governance scandal was the attempted concealment. The FA press office issued formal legal denials regarding Eriksson's involvement, only for internal leaks and investigative journalism to expose those statements as falsehoods. The escalation was driven by a relentless media frenzy. The News of the World and other outlets published intimate details daily, unveiling a culture of unprofessionalism and deceit at the heart of the governing body. The revelation that the FA had deliberately misled the public to shield its executives proved to be the decisive blow. The fallout effectively dismantled the FA's hierarchy. Mark Palios resigned immediately, acknowledging his position was untenable, with the Director of Communications soon following suit. While Eriksson survived the immediate purge, his authority was severely diminished under intense public scrutiny. The saga left the FA's reputation in ruins, reducing the national team's preparations to a media circus and reinforcing the perception of the organisation as deeply dysfunctional. Marseille Match-Fixing. In 1993, Olympique de Marseille had reached the pinnacle of European football. Under the stewardship of the charismatic yet controversial owner Bernard Tapie, the club was a star-studded powerhouse on the verge of history, poised to become the first French team to lift the Champions League trophy. However, their crowning achievement was immediately eclipsed by a scandal that exposed the illicit foundation of their domestic dominance. The crisis, known as the Valenciennes OM affair, centred on a league fixture scheduled just days before the European final against AC Milan. To ensure his squad remained injury-free and fresh for the continental showdown, Tapie orchestrated a scheme to bribe players from rival club Valenciennes to offer minimal physical resistance. The conspiracy unravelled when Valenciennes player Jacques Glassman refused the illicit payment and exposed the attempt, triggering a rigorous criminal investigation. The ensuing inquiry uncovered irrefutable evidence of corruption. Police raids and interrogations led to the discovery of cash envelopes buried in gardens and secured testimony confirming that Marseille officials had actively compromised the integrity of the league. The fallout for the French giants was catastrophic. The French Football Federation stripped Marseille of their 1993 Ligue 1 title and forcibly relegated them to the second division. Furthermore, UEFA barred them from defending their European title. Tapie was eventually sentenced to prison, and while Marseille technically retained their Champions League trophy, the scandal dismantled their dynasty, leaving an indelible stain on French football's greatest triumph. Barcagate. In 2020, FC Barcelona was enduring a period of significant turbulence, relying heavily on the individual brilliance of Lionel Messi to conceal widening institutional fractures. Yet, while the team battled on the pitch, a clandestine conflict was intensifying within the Camp Nou offices, one that would expose the systemic corruption at the heart of the club's leadership. The scandal, dubbed Barçagate, centred on allegations that President Josep Maria Bartomeu and his board had contracted a third-party PR firm, i3 Ventures, to orchestrate a secret smear campaign against their own players and legends, including Messi, Gerard Piqué, and Pep Guardiola. The situation escalated when the Catalan police force, the Mossos d'Esquadra, raided the club's headquarters in a high-profile search for evidence. Leaked documents subsequently revealed that the administration had paid grossly inflated fees for these reputation management services, deliberately fragmenting invoices into smaller sums to bypass internal oversight committees. The most damning revelation was that the club's own funds were effectively being utilised to finance social media bots designed to bolster Bartomeu's image, while eroding the standing of the locker room leaders. The fallout was chaotic and unprecedented. Bartomeu and several top executives were arrested on provisional charges of unfair administration and corruption, compelling the entire board to resign in disgrace. While the club avoided sporting sanctions such as relegation, the scandal shattered the trust between the squad and the hierarchy. It fostered a toxic environment that accelerated Lionel Messi's eventual departure and laid bare a financial crisis that continues to haunt the institution to this day. Leicester City and the Thailand Scandal. In May 2015, Leicester City was riding a wave of relief, having just executed the Great Escape to survive relegation from the Premier League. To celebrate and expand the brand, the squad travelled to Thailand, the home nation of the club's owners, for a post-season goodwill tour intended to strengthen ties with the local fan base. Instead, the trip triggered a public relations disaster that threatened to alienate the very stakeholders financing the club. The scandal erupted when a sexually explicit video was leaked to the press. It depicted 3 young players, Tom Hopper, Adam Smith, and James Pearson, the son of manager Nigel Pearson, engaging in acts with the local women in a hotel room. The footage was damning, not merely for the conduct, but for the audio. The players were heard laughing and directing vile racist epithets at the women, insulting them while representing the club in the owner's own country. The evidence was undeniable, and the punishment was absolute. The club immediately terminated the contracts of all 3 players, citing a breach of conduct incompatible with their values. The shockwaves persisted weeks later, when manager Nigel Pearson, despite his on-field success, was also dismissed, a decision widely interpreted as a direct consequence of the fallout involving his son. Paradoxically, this sordid chapter laid the groundwork for the greatest miracle in sports history. Pearson's replacement was Claudio Ranieri, who would lead the reformed squad to an unprecedented Premier League title just 1 year later. Calciopoli. In 2006, Juventus reigned as the supreme force of Italian football, a squad replete with World Cup winners like Fabio Cannavaro and Gianluigi Buffon. They had just secured their 2nd consecutive Serie A title, appearing invincible on the pitch. Yet this facade of sporting excellence concealed a clandestine network of influence that would soon precipitate the most significant crisis in the history of Italian sport. The scandal, known as Calciopoli, erupted when prosecutors exposed a systemic corruption ring centred on Juventus general manager Luciano Moggi. The accusations were distinct from traditional match-fixing. Moggi was charged with exerting illicit pressure on referee designators to assign specific, favourable officials to key matches, effectively engineering the league's ecosystem to benefit the Bianconeri. The investigation culminated in the release of thousands of intercepted telephone conversations. These wiretaps provided irrefutable evidence, capturing Moggi brazenly dictating referee appointments and admonishing officials, confirming that the outcomes of Italy's top flight were being manipulated from the boardroom. The judicial response was unprecedented. The Italian Football Federation stripped Juventus of their 2005 and 2006 Scudetti and forcibly relegated the club to Serie B for the first time in their history, imposing a severe points deduction to begin the new campaign, while other clubs, including AC Milan and Lazio, faced sanctions. Juventus bore the heaviest burden. The scandal dismantled a legendary squad and cast a permanent shadow over an era of dominance, fundamentally altering the hierarchy of Calcio, Ajax and Mark Overmars. By 2022, Ajax had successfully reasserted its status as a European heavyweight, globally admired for a business model that fused elite youth development with astute recruitment. The architect of this renaissance was director of football Mark Overmars, a club legend whose discerning eye had assembled a squad capable of challenging the continent's elite. However, this reputation for operational excellence was abruptly dismantled by a scandal that exposed a toxic culture of harassment behind the scenes at the Johan Cruyff Arena. The controversy broke when reports surfaced that Overmars had sent a series of inappropriate messages and explicit photos to multiple female colleagues over an extended period. The catalyst for the revelation came from within the institution itself. Following an internal email encouraging staff to report misconduct, several women came forward with corroborating testimonies. Faced with irrefutable proof of his actions, Overmars admitted to the behaviour, rendering his position instantly untenable. The repercussions were swift and personal. Overmars resigned immediately via a late-night announcement that stunned the football world. The Royal Dutch Football Association subsequently imposed a suspension that FIFA extended globally, effectively barring him from holding any position in professional football worldwide for a fixed term. For Ajax, the legacy of the scandal was devastating. They lost the mastermind behind their sporting success, and fundamentally, the club's image as a safe, professional organisation was shattered, precipitating a period of significant instability and decline. Mexico national team party. In the summer of 2018, the Mexican national team was preparing to depart for the World Cup in Russia, carrying the hopes of a nation desperate to break its historical quarter-final barrier. Following a farewell victory against Scotland at the Estadio Azteca, the squad was granted a free night before travelling. However, what transpired turned a celebratory send-off into a sordid tabloid scandal that threatened to compromise their entire campaign before it began. The controversy ignited when the publication TV Notas released paparazzi photographs of players arriving at a private residence in an upscale Mexico City neighbourhood. The report alleged that the marathon gathering, which extended until 4 p.m. the following day, was attended by 30 VIP escorts. While key figures such as Hector Herrera and Javier Chicharito Hernandez were implicated, the images created a media firestorm, suggesting the squad was prioritising hedonism over their historical objectives. The response from the Mexican Football Federation was arguably as controversial as the party itself. They declined to sanction the players. Officials maintained that because the squad was technically on free time and had not missed mandatory training, no internal codes of conduct had been breached. Although there were no suspensions or fines, the personal fallout was severe, with several players reportedly managing family crises and marital strain during the tournament preparations. The scandal evolved into a significant distraction, fueling the narrative of indiscipline that critics argued had long hindered El Tri on the global stage. Newcastle United's bad boys era. Between 2010 and 2013, Newcastle United was defined less by its football and more by a dressing room that frequently attracted the attention of law enforcement. While the squad possessed undeniable talent, they garnered a reputation as the Premier League's most dysfunctional unit, labelled the Bad Boys by the British press. Under the ownership of Mike Ashley, the club struggled to discipline a roster populated by volatile personalities who repeatedly found themselves in legal jeopardy. The chaos was headlined by midfielder Joey Barton, who served a prison sentence for assault, and striker Andy Carroll, whose off-field turbulence included assault charges and an incident where his Range Rover was set ablaze while parked at his captain's home. Compounding the disorder was Niall Ranger, a young forward whose recurring arrests for criminal damage and disorderly conduct became a persistent distraction. The defining characteristic of this era was that court dates and police inquiries began to eclipse match highlights in the nightly news cycle. The consequences were a mixture of incarceration, financial penalties, and forced departures. Barton was eventually offloaded to QPR on a free transfer following public criticism of the board, while Carroll was sold to Liverpool for £35 million, a transaction widely interpreted as the club cashing in on a high-risk asset before his value diminished. Niall Ranger was ultimately released after the club exhausted its patience. The legacy of this period was a hardened reputation for instability that alienated supporters and transformed St James Park into a spectacle of dysfunction, overshadowing the club's sporting potential for years. Malky Mackay and I. Moody texts. In 2014, Malky Mackay was regarded as one of the brightest young managers in British football, having successfully guided Cardiff City to the Premier League. He was on the verge of being appointed the manager of Crystal Palace, a move poised to solidify his status in the top flight. However, his career trajectory was abruptly halted by the exposure of a dossier of private communications that revealed a deep-seated culture of prejudice within his management team. The scandal erupted when Cardiff City owner Vincent Tan, then engaged in a bitter legal dispute with Mackay, submitted a comprehensive file to the Football Association and Crystal Palace. The dossier contained thousands of text messages exchanged between Mackay and his sporting director, Aoinean Moody. The content was appalled. The transcripts revealed racist slurs regarding Asian and black players, sexist comments concerning female agents, and homophobic remarks that sent shockwaves through the industry. The fallout was instantaneous. Upon reviewing the evidence, Crystal Palace immediately withdrew their job offer, leaving Mackay unemployed and publicly disgraced. The publication of the transcripts by the press provided irrefutable proof, rendering denial impossible. While the FA launched a formal investigation, the immediate penalty was professional exile. Although Mackay apologised for what he termed disrespectful language, the reputational damage was absolute. The scandal, known as Textgate, destroyed his standing as a progressive coach and stands as a permanent cautionary tale regarding the conduct expected of public figures in the digital age. The paper ball of Hamburg. In the spring of 2009, German football was dominated by a fierce Nordderby rivalry between Hamburger SV and Werder Bremen, who clashed 4 times in just 19 days across 3 different competitions. The stakes were highest in the UEFA Cup semi-final, with Hamburg favoured to reach the final in their own stadium. Yet, in the decisive second leg, the tie was determined not by a moment of tactical brilliance, but by a piece of litter discarded from the stands. The controversy unfolded late in the match, with Hamburg leading 1-0, as Hamburg defender Michael Gravgaard attempted a routine clearance. The match ball struck a crumpled wad of paper thrown by the home fans at the exact moment of contact. The unpredictable bounce caused the ball to ricochet off his shin and out for a corner kick. The slow-motion replay provided the definitive proof. The crumpled paper had acted as an unwitting 12th man for the opposition. The consequences were catastrophic. From the resulting corner, Frank Baumann scored for Bremen, shifting the momentum of the entire tie. Bremen went on to win the match 3-2, eliminating Hamburg on away goals. The Papierkugel became a cult icon in Bremen. It was celebrated by their supporters, granted its own mock television interview, and eventually displayed in the club's museum. For Hamburg, it remains a bitter symbol of self-sabotage, a literal piece of refuse that cost them a shot at European glory. NWSL Abuse Scandal. By 2021, the National Women's Soccer League in the United States was positioning itself as the premier destination for elite talent, home to icons like Megan Rapinoe and Alex Morgan. However, this facade of professional excellence concealed a systemic culture of abuse that had been neglected by those in power for nearly a decade. The league faced a reckoning not over sporting results, but over the fundamental safety of its workforce. The scandal erupted when The Athletic published a bombshell investigation detailing years of sexual coercion and verbal abuse by Paul Riley, one of the league's most decorated coaches. The report revealed that players, including Manashim and Sinead Farrelly, had reported Riley's behaviour years prior, yet he had been permitted to continue coaching across different franchises. The damning evidence lay in the paper trail, which proved that both the league and the US Soccer Federation had been alerted to the abuse but failed to intervene, effectively prioritising brand stability over player welfare. The fallout resulted in a complete dismantling of the league's hierarchy. Commissioner Lisa Baird resigned, Riley was fired and subsequently banned for life, and half of the league's head coaches were eventually dismissed or resigned amid various misconduct allegations. The subsequent independent investigation, known as the Yates Report, confirmed that abuse was deeply rooted in the league's infrastructure. The scandal fundamentally shifted the power dynamic in women's sports, catalysing the creation of a collective bargaining agreement focused heavily on player safety and institutional accountability. The death of Wimbledon FC. In 2002, Wimbledon FC was a club defined by a proud, defiant history, famously conquering the FA Cup in 1988 against the odds as the Crazy Gang. However, the club faced an existential threat not from relegation, but from within its own boardroom. In a move unprecedented in European football, the ownership proposed relocating the club 60 miles north to Milton Keynes, effectively importing the American concept of franchise sports into the English game. The controversy lay in the relocation itself. The Football Association granted permission for the move despite overwhelming opposition, allowing the owners to sever the club from its South London community in an attempt to tap into a new market. The ultimate betrayal was the realisation by the fan base that their loyalty was viewed as irrelevant to the business plan. The club was effectively being stolen from under their noses. The supporters responded with a total boycott, refusing to acknowledge or follow the rebranded MK Dons. The fallout created a cultural schism rather than a standard sporting punishment, while MK Dons faced no official sanctions for the relocation. They were treated as pariahs by the wider football community. The abandoned fans mobilised to form a Phoenix club, AFC Wimbledon, restarting from the very bottom of the football pyramid. The legacy of this betrayal is the incredible rise of AFC Wimbledon, who eventually climbed back through the leagues to overtake MK Dons, proving that a football club is defined by its community, not its franchise licence. Maradona, the hand of God, the 1986 World Cup quarter-final between Argentina and England was already charged with immense geopolitical tension following the Falklands War. Played in the searing heat of Mexico City, the match became the stage for the most polarising moment in football history. The incident occurred 6 minutes into the second half, when Argentine captain Diego Maradona chased a looping clearance. Standing just 5 feet 5 inches, he leaped against England goalkeeper Peter Shilton and punched the ball into the net with his left hand. The infringement was obvious to everyone except the officials. While England players swarmed the referee, pointing to their hands, the Tunisian official, Ali bin Nasser, missed the contact entirely and awarded the goal. Maradona later famously characterised the act as being scored a little with the head of Maradona and a little with the hand of God, sealing the moment in infamy. Because video assistant referee technology did not exist, there was no recourse. The goal stood, and Argentina won 2-1, eventually lifting the World Cup. The legacy of the hand of God is twofold. It remains a deep scar on the psyche of English football, representing the ultimate sporting injustice, yet it also cemented Maradona's legend as a figure of divine, chaotic genius. Decades later, this specific incident is frequently cited as the primary historical argument that necessitated the introduction of VAR to the modern game.